So there are stop signs. They've put up stop signs here at Pike Street, and we're looking now in the direction of Campbellville. So that's Campbellville. There's some, I think, hotels, local hotels in Campbellville. But let's continue with our walk down south on this new strip park, which I'm calling Conversation Free Park, where they've installed these public infrastructure. Again, another sink without water. So I can't say that this is completed. I wouldn't say that they've completed the construction of this park, because as you can see, none of these sinks and foot washing stations have been hooked up to water, but they did install some waste bins. Still cows. Oh, and let me see. So they've actually built a fence on one side. So this fence on the east side of the strip park seems to have been completed in red and blue, mind you. But there's no fence on the west side, although somebody seems to have been intending to build a fence here. And there's a cow, which reminds you that this area used to be country. This was actually not part of the city proper, but it has now been absorbed into what is Greater Georgetown. So like I said, yeah, these photo washing stations, kind of strange and new because I haven't seen them before, but they're not yet completed. They have not yet been hooked up to water. But what has changed since the last time we were here is a lot of these concrete tables and benches have been installed. Still a whole lot of animal droppings on the sidewalk, which tells me that the animals probably enjoy this area much more than humans. And as you can see, homes in Bel Air, sorry, I'm calling this place Bel Air, it's actually Prashad Nagar. Homes in Prashad Nagar, quite different from the homes on the other side in Campbellville. Although I assume that will change eventually as the city becomes more affluent and people start returning to Guyana to build their homes. In the distance, I think you can see what is the tallest residential building in Georgetown. That is a high-rise apartment building on Sheriff Street, or close to Sheriff Street. Alright, that's a high-rise apartment building. Buddies started constructing that building for apartments several years ago in Campbellville. Morning. But I think it's under new ownership now. And somebody else here in Prashad Nagar is building a tall residential building. I'm assuming it's residential. It might be commercial residential. But that's what's happening in Prashad Nagar, and it's happening all over the city. People are going up taller, and that's because space is restricted. You can't really build out wider because the house lots are so narrow and small. So that is the the tallest apartment building here in Georgetown, in Campbellville, near to Sheriff Street. And I think that's 4th Street, Campbellville. But we are on Conversation Tree Road, taking the walk down from the seawall to Dennis Street, and we're almost at Dennis Street. This last street I think is called Campbell Avenue. This intersection before we get to.
Distance 4 miles. Duration 1 hour 12 minutes 58 seconds. Pace 34 minutes 50 seconds per mile.
So somebody's building a mega mansion here in Prashad Nagar. Here at Campbell Avenue. Of course, the street changed its name in Prashad Nagar. And we are on so that's Campbell Avenue, looking west towards the center of Georgetown, towards the central Georgetown and Campbellville. And on this side, it's Delhi Street. And I can't remember the name. Some of you can in the comments can remind me the name of that street. But here's looking back where we've come from. That's looking north on Conversation Tree Road, now Conversation Tree Park, towards the seawall where we've come from. And this is looking south. Towards the end of this park, we've actually walked the entire length of this Conversation Tree Park that divides Campbellville and Prashad Nagar. Now, I said in the past, and I still repeat, this area, this reserve, because this is what it was a piece of reserve land, would be suitable for building a light rail, even an elevated rail. So eventually the city would become clogged with cars. This is another a new car service located here, probably a dispatch service for a taxi company. The city will become clogged with vehicles unless you build some public transit. And I don't mean buses, I mean trains, I mean light rail, I mean streetcars. Right? I think that is the next stage of development that's going to make this city better and make it more commutable, more walkable, more livable. If in fact you turn if you turn all of the reserve land, and there's a lot of reserve land, which tells me that the city planners initially, that is in the 1960s or 1970s when these communities were built, had very good ideas about planning. You know, I actually make the comparison between what Brazil built. Brazil built a brand new city in the 1960s called Brasilia. They moved their capital to Brasilia. And if you look at Brasilia, capital of Brazil, you can see the architect, the work of the architect, Oscar Niemeyer. So Niemeyer designed most of the state buildings, the government buildings in Brasilia. And 60 years later, they are just as futuristic. They look as impressive today as they did in the 1960s, 1960 when they were designed. And so what is missing from Georgetown, and particularly from the new city, Silica City, that the government is building, is this sense of architecture planning, that somebody actually went out and found the best architects to design the city and to plan how it would be laid out and to design the architecture, the buildings that would be there, like Brasilia did. So this reserve that we're walking on was created in the 1960s. So somebody back in the 1960s planned this. But here in 2024, there is a lack of planning, a lack of, lack of imagination. So while putting a strip park here would seem to be interesting or pleasing to some people, it's not functional in the sense that you don't get the most people using it for the land, the reserve land. So if you'd put let's say you'd put a train line, a light rail, all the way down to the seawall or the train line road, and you ran a light rail down this strip of land connecting these neighborhoods to the city center. Now on Dennis Street you would have another set of light rails, could be elevated rails. This is Dennis Street now, and we're going to turn west on Dennis Street towards the city. But if you look east, this is Dennis Street, and that street runs all the